Hello, can you hear me? Hello, I'm not sure what the yes means. No, right? Okay, just give me some time to switch. Um, just give me some time to switch. I think it's a PC thing. Hi guys, sorry about that delay. I'm so sorry about that. I think it was the PC I was using that was having issues. Just one last check. Just let me know if you can hear me so that I can go ahead and start. Excellent. I'm so sorry. I think we've spent about 7 minutes trying to fix this. So yeah, I'll just get straight to the point and start. My name is Precious, as everyone all knows. I'm a platform engineering lead at Licon. Licon is a company, health and fitness company based out of Germany. So I lead all platform initiatives like building out the platforms that our engineers use to provision cloud infrastructure and making it easy for, I mean, everything around developer experience, trying to make it easy for them to be able to spin up a simple service to test and to do a handful of other things. So that is currently what I do at Licon. It's a pretty tasking job, but then I enjoy it a lot. So I'm here to answer everyone's question when it comes to cloud engineering. What do I do when it comes to? We've had a handful of questions, and I'm going to um, start with those questions first, then we can go ahead and continue from the ones on the comment section. And I think they revolve around career, they revolve around getting a job, they revolve around technologies. We are going to discuss all that today. So I'll just get started. And so the first question I have here, the first person said, um, the first choice is how do I get I just started out um, I just started out I just got my first cloud certification, right? But I haven't gotten a job yet, right? So how how do I continue? I think this was my phone. He says, how do I continue? I'm almost frustrated. So yeah, very interesting question, right? It's something that I see a lot of. I get a handful of DMs about that every day, right? And I see people start out in tech, and and the first thing they do is that they write their first certification, and you write the cloud practitioner certification. You go on to write, let's even say Azure Fundamentals or Google Associate. And the next thing is that they think that they are now cloud engineers, right? Now, the thing about cloud engineering is that it's not necessarily a certification based career, right? The certifications are great, the certifications are wonderful. I wrote certifications because I wanted to, first of all, upskill, right? And secondly, is that I wanted to get beyond HR barrier because I've been doing cloud for the past 6 years. But fundamentally, when you get into this, um, right? When you get into these interviews, right, they are not necessarily what you get asked. Nobody asks you how to. I'm getting an echo somewhere. I don't know what's happening. Um, I'm getting an echo, but I'll continue. So necessarily, what people ask you are not how do you spin up EC2 instances. The questions you see in your certification questions. Sorry, I'm getting an echo somewhere. Now, the thing is that fundamentally what you get asked is that how do you solve these business problems, We have a team of 10, we have a team of 11, right? And as software engineers, and we're all trying to build an application. And how do you make sure that the application these people build moves from GitHub to staging to prod? So essentially, nobody asks you about your certification. What HR sees, or what I've hired is a handful of engineers, a handful of DevOps engineers throughout my career, right? And what we want to see, first of all, is that this person has the discipline to write a certification. But then when he comes, because we know that sometimes all certifications um, are not written out of sheer hard work. Some people have their ways. There are a lot of sites that offer you DOMs and all that to write certifications, right? Now, when the person gets beyond the HR barrier, the next question is, what can this person do? Can this person fit into what our business, can this person fit into the team and solve what our business problems are? So I'm sorry to tell you this, but a cloud practitioner certification is not going to get you a job, right? What is going to get you a job is the projects you work on, and most importantly, your ability to go out there and explore, write about what you know, and follow through. Find a mentor, follow through a mentor. Let that person guide you on real life business problems to solve. Follow through somebody who checks up on you and knows whether you're going the wrong direction or the right direction. That is basically what gets you a job, right? Not just writing certification. You can have 5 certifications and 0 real life experience. What recruiters are looking for and what companies are looking for is real life business problem solving experience. So I'm going to go into the next question. Um, the next question says, okay, this person says, how much do I earn as a DevOps engineer? Right. So if your question does not get asked here, or I don't discuss it, it probably means I collapsed it into one of, because I mean there are questions around career, there are questions around pay, there are questions around technology, right? And I'm just going to answer. I just collapsed them into 6 major questions, and I'm going to answer them. Then we can take questions from the comment section, because some questions are duplicated in terms of context. So the next question is, okay, so the person is talking about pay, right? Now, the first thing about pay is that it's relative. It's relative. It's across industry, right? And I don't think that as a DevOps engineer, the first thing you should be, or somebody who's starting out in cloud, the first thing you should be looking at is pay, right? Pay of um, what you get paid, right? I think it's more about how much experience do you build, right? I've seen people who have 5 years experience, who or 3 years experience, who are earning more than people who have 5 years experience, right? It's a function of where you work, the kind of industry you work, and the company that hires you, right? But it's not I wouldn't really comment so much about pay, because pay differs across regions. The pay you get for working in Nigerian company is not the kind of pay you're going to get when you're working across when you're working with a South African company, or when you're working with a US company, right? So pay is completely not it's there's no standard to what pay, how much pay you get. So I can't tell you that a junior engineer earns X amount of money, right? It's just dependent on the industry and all. Um, okay, so this person asked, okay, um, is Kubernetes really important in cloud computing? Is Kubernetes really important in cloud computing? If yes, why? So Kubernetes is really very important in cloud computing in 2023, right? 3 years ago, 5 years ago, Kubernetes wasn't so important. But now, a lot of businesses are modernizing their applications, they're modernizing their workloads, which means that they are trying to move their containers, they are trying to move their applications to the cloud. Their applications that are already running on the cloud as traditional applications are trying to become portable. They're trying to make it portable and scalable by containerizing it, which means that you need to be able to orchestrate these containers. Now, there are two major tools or three major tools for container orchestration. The cloud provider dependent orchestration tool, which means that you have AWS ECS, right? You have Azure Container Service, you have Google Cloud's own container service, right? And then you have Kubernetes, then you have Docker Swarm, then you have HashiCorp Nomad, right? These are the three major container orchestration service today, right? We used to have one from Apache, which is now obsolete. Nobody uses it. Now, businesses start out by sometimes running their container service on the cloud with some of these cloud provider container services, right? But now, one of the challenges is that these cloud container provider services, it becomes very difficult to run a handful of different workloads, right? It becomes difficult to, first of all, to run things like jobs on them. You know, they have a certain way they handle their jobs. So all these container services, right, on different clouds, they have their different approach to running things, which is very difficult for businesses. Sometimes for businesses to get somebody who has this expertise, right? But it's just like modernizing and standardizing how application containers are run. That is what Google has done by building Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is really popular because it's just one way of doing so many things in the same way, right? So if you learn Kubernetes, it means you can orchestrate Kubernetes on EKS, you can orchestrate Kubernetes on AKS, you can orchestrate Kubernetes on GKE, right? Google Container Engine, Azure Container Service. There's just slight differences, right? That's why businesses are moving towards Kubernetes. Businesses are moving towards Kubernetes because they want to create a standard way of today. If we move from AWS or we have some workloads running on GCP, right? Do we start looking for somebody who understands how Google's container services run, right? Or do we just find a Kubernetes engineer, or do our existing engineers, would they be able to work in that environment? So across the businesses I've run, I've seen that that is actually one win for people who have moved to Kubernetes, right? Is that they don't need to find somebody who has specialty, right? There might just be a little learning curve around understanding the platform, but it's just one size fits all, right? So you have an engineer who understands Kubernetes, you can use him to deploy across Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Oracle, or AWS. So that is one reason why businesses love Kubernetes and businesses are moving there. So it's very important, very, very important that you learn Kubernetes in 2023, right? Don't just learn your cloud provider and don't just learn your cloud provider set related services on containers and go on, right? It's very difficult to find people these days, even people who are running these days on cloud provider. The cloud provider provided container services, they are looking to move to Kubernetes, probably around cost and some other legacy issues that's holding them back. So it's very important you learn it. Then another beautiful way of going ahead to master Kubernetes is also by taking the Code Cloud course, right? This is not an advert, I'm just telling you it's a very beautiful course. I've taken it in the past, right? It's one place to start out from. Um, what are the key factors to consider when selecting a cloud provider to start from? Okay, so I'll just be quick on this. Now, it's dependent on the industry you want to work. It's dependent on your location. I have friends who live in Canada, in some certain regions in Canada, where Azure jobs are the most popular jobs. Here in Nigeria, if you are going to work in the banking sector, right, um, Azure is the most popular cloud among the banking industry, right? Um, when I started out with Microsoft Azure, funny enough, right? But I didn't go ahead with Microsoft Azure because it wasn't, there were not a lot of startups using Microsoft Azure at the point. And sometimes when you work with a startup and you're trying to convince them and they speak to some of their friends who are also running startups and they say, oh, we use AWS and it's really good for us. So a lot of startups don't use Microsoft Azure, right? They use either AWS or GCP. So it depends on the industry you're currently. If you're working in the banking sector or you're working in the financial sector, right? Microsoft Azure is the easiest way to go ahead and Microsoft Azure is the easiest way to go ahead and start your career out. If you already have existing contacts and friends, or probably you're looking to move from one department to the other, don't learn AWS, because if you learn AWS, it's going to be a waste. Learn Microsoft Azure, because in that sense, you can speak to maybe a cloud manager in the company and say, okay, I have this certification, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm thinking of moving to your department. But if you're looking to work in as an independent contractor within uh, Nigeria, right, or you're looking to work with a lot of startups, AWS is the most popular cloud, right? And if you're looking at relocating, or you're looking at moving across states, maybe you live in the US, you live um, maybe in Canada, right? We also need to understand what is the most popular cloud in this particular region where I'm moving to, right? Because different region, different cloud provider that works for them, right? So that is one of the biggest consideration. Don't just dive head deep into AWS. I had a friend who relocated to US. He really went on to write the Google Professional Cloud Architect. Did almost like 3, 4 certifications. But he found himself in when he relocated, he found out that it wasn't really being used as much, right? In the company where he was, because he was looking to a cloud engineer from a software engineer. So he had to start his certification journey and learning journey from scratch, starting out from AWS, right? So that's it. I think the fifth question here, right, is how can someone with a limited technical background start learning about cloud engineering and related technologies? So if you have a limited technical background, it's very simple, right? The first thing you need to identify is to understand what exactly if cloud is for you, because there's a lot of buzz around cloud, and everybody thinks that the first thing I need to do when everybody talks about cloud and how it's like everywhere, everybody's switching to cloud, and the first thing I have to ask myself is um, perhaps I should just do that, right? And it's a good idea, but I think fundamentally you need to ask yourself if cloud is for you. Speak to somebody. I have people who reach out to my DMs um, almost every day, right? And sometimes I schedule sessions with them, speak with them, right? Reach out to someone and ask them, or somebody who you already know that's in the field. Ask them what it entails. What does cloud computing entail? Don't just go to Google and Google it, or maybe to Reddit, right? Ask them what are the day-to-day jobs, tasks. What's your day-to-day in cloud engineering like, right? If you're somebody who doesn't necessarily like coding, I'm sorry, you need to learn coding when you're. And that's the last question I'm going to answer right now, right? Before I go to the comment section, you need to know that cloud involves a bit of coding. First of all, you're going to write bash scripting. You're going to automate processes using things like Python, languages like Python, right? And Terraform is not necessarily a programming language, but then it has a bit of some programming in it, where you have to do loops, you have to do a handful of things, you deal with data types and all. So you need to know that if you have phobia for coding, and you're somebody who has tried to learn software engineering beforehand and you didn't succeed, or probably you just ran away, then you need to know that you're not going to run away from that in cloud engineering. It's a fundamental skill. It's something that is very well needed, right? So if you have a limited tech background, the first thing you need to do is speak to somebody, ask them what it entails to do cloud, what's their day-to-day job like, right? Now, secondly, is start out from the very basics. Don't start out learning AWS. Don't start out learning how to use GCP. You're going to get lost. I know people who know how to use Terraform today, but they don't know how to do bash scripting. They know how to deploy an EC2 instance in AWS and probably install Nginx because they learned it through tutorials, right? But they don't understand what simple networking is, what IP addresses are, what subnets are. Those things are one of the fundamental things you need to learn as somebody who is going into cloud engineering. So you need to learn the basics. Make up your mind that you're going to do this, then you learn the basics. The basics involves learning how to do bash scripting, learning the Linux commands. You probably learn spin up a VM on the cloud, or probably so if you use a Windows PC, right? You can install something like VirtualBox and install Linux on it and start learning how Linux commands work and Linux operating systems. Because Linux operating systems are web servers are deployed, right? Web servers run 60% of the web servers in the world run Linux operating systems, right? I don't think in the past 4 years, if not for some migration I did 4 years ago, I've used any Linux PC, Linux server. I've used any Windows server in the cloud, right? So you need to understand Linux. Most applications, almost 99% of applications you're going to work with, right? Unless ones that have special needs are actually going to be Linux. So you need to understand how it works. So first of all, you understand Linux. You're going to understand concepts around um, cloud, things like networking, all the major concepts around cloud that you need to learn, right? And after this call, I'm going to put up like a small career guide because I know I've had that in the past. A lot of people have reached out to me, just a small career guide based on my own experience and the people I've mentored and the people who I've mentored and they've gone on to become solutions architects, DevOps engineers, right? So I'll put up something like that and share on my feed. But you need to learn the basics first. Anybody who says start out doing AWS and you don't have the fundamentals, then that person hasn't done any good, right? So it's very important that you learn the fundamentals and basics. Don't just dive head in and start provisioning instances. Now, your career growth, I'm still talking about somebody with a limited technical background, right? First of all, there's a lot of things, to be honest with you, there's a lot of things you're going to learn. And at first, it's going to be overwhelming, right? And there's this thing I tell my friends, and I tell a handful of people who say, "Oh, you know this, you know a lot of things." I tell them that there is no genius. I think that you can learn anything you want to, you put your mind to learn, right? And I've been able to learn a lot of things over the years by spending time with them, repeating and repeating and repeating them, um, and to the point where I know them like the back of my hand. I've spent so much time with AWS that I know it like the back of my hand, right? And um, don't just learn X, just don't just learn one thing and you think that it's enough. You have to. This is the age of technology. This is the age of the internet, right? You need to bring out yourself, go out there, do a lot of research, pay for courses, invest your time in knowledge. In the past 2 years, I've spent over $3,000 in upskilling myself, and it's no joke, right? Because I want to stay at the top of what companies need. I currently migrated a huge project in my company using Crossplane, right? And just now that companies are trying to adopt Crossplane and all that, I spent the whole of last year doing a lot of POCs, learning Crossplane and how to use it to build platforms, right? So I spent a lot of money upskilling myself, and of course, it's an investment into your knowledge, right? Into yourself, right? So you need to repeat these things. You need to learn them. You need to make sure that you're not just half baked, right? So that's what I think as a someone with limited technical background. You need to bring out yourself. You need to open your mind and open. You need to learn it. I've seen people who have gone from music, from biology, from veterinary medicine into cloud, and it's no rocket science. Forget I studied computer science, but I think that anybody can learn cloud computing. Anybody can build on it, and anybody can grow, build a career on it, right? So, but you just need to repeat things. Go out there. There's a lot of knowledge out there to help you solve all the problems you have. At first, it's going to be overwhelming, but with time, as you keep repeating things, it becomes simpler and simpler and simpler. Then you can now start thinking about a career path, right? When you've understood the basics and you started, and that's one thing why you need a mentor in this field, right? You need to reach out to somebody who has done it again to speak, let that person have a health check on your growth and all. So the last question, I don't go on talking about this. So the last question is, do I need coding to get into cloud computing? You need coding. You might not need coding today, right? Before you start learning cloud, or when you want to switch your career to cloud, you probably don't need to know how to code before that. But as you get into cloud, it's very important that you know how to code, right? Or you would just end up being somebody who understands how to serve, something like a solutions architect, right? But then even a solutions architect uh, do a lot of POCs to understand the services they are offering or they are proposing to the customers and the companies themselves. So you need to learn coding. You need to learn on, because coding is what drives automation, right? You can't automate if you're not coding, if you don't know how to code, right? So you need to learn coding when you have learned. It's one of the fundamental things you need to learn. You pick a language. I think Python is the simplest. Python doesn't require you to understand so much. I wouldn't recommend Go unless you're probably a platform engineer. You probably have some prior experience to coding, right? But I recommend Python. There are tons of materials out there. Pick up Python, use it to write Lambda functions. That Python would help you understand how, even if you intend to switch tomorrow to maybe writing something like Golang, right? It's important to learn how to code, right? So coding is very important once you're in the field. If not, you just be left behind. If you don't want to get left behind, right? You need to learn how to code. So I think I can take some questions on the comment sections, and we can just discuss around some topics you probably think is difficult. I have some other questions I will probably discuss. If we don't have enough on the comment sections, then yeah. So somebody, Tony says, having worked as a junior sysops, then I transitioned into cloud. Please, can you give a good roadmap to get started? I've been doing a lot of bash scripting and Terraform. Don't know where to go from here. So if you have been working as a sysops, you have like a very excellent background to build an amazing career, because sysops, most of what you're going to do in sysops are the fundamentals of what cloud requires you to know before you become a cloud engineer, right? Now, you've done a lot of bash scripting, you're moving into Terraform, right? One thing you need to know, which can never be overemphasized, is to build real life projects. Build projects. Don't just learn EC2 into how to provision Terraform and how to use Terraform to provision an EC2. Then you go ahead and provision an EC2 instance and you tell people, I know how to use Terraform, right? Now, how do you build? If I were to learn Terraform today, or if I were to recommend how to learn Terraform today, right, I would ask someone, first of all, Terraform is for provisioning infrastructure, right? How do you write Terraform code, push it to GitHub, build a GitHub action that deploys the infrastructure in the cloud, right? Now, if I'm deploying an infrastructure, I can take a use case where I'm deploying an infrastructure to the cloud, right? And the use case would be deploy an EC2 instance, right? The networking associated with it, deploy a database, right? Deploy all it requires. Maybe take a sample example of deploying the infrastructure for a 3-tier app, right? And because most organizations run 3-tier apps, the front end, the back end, and the database, right? So I wouldn't just pick snippets or bits and pieces of Terraform, using Terraform to deploy EC2 instance, using Terraform to set up IAM, right? I wouldn't do all that. I would, by picking up a simple project, right? Maybe a simple front end, back end project, and something I've continued to emphasize, right? When you build out projects, don't just build out projects that require you to provision infrastructure. Have a code base, right? Have your POC code base, right? A POC code base, like how I'll put it is, I have a very small, I have a POC code base that is a front end engineer, right? Sorry, that's a front end application, that is a back end application, a simple Node.js application, a simple front end application, and a database for it, right? An SQL database for it. What I do each time I want to run things, or I want to test out a few concepts, maybe I'm looking at AWS Amplify, I'm trying to set up a VPN that maybe I deploy this application in a private subnet, right? It doesn't have access to the internet, right? And I want to just test maybe a VPN, right? So what I do is I deploy this application to probably like an maybe a container, not necessarily S3, right? I deploy maybe the backend to maybe a container too, and I run the SQL and create a database, execute this SQL in it, and populate the fields in the database. Now, probably I deploy the VPN. Right. What I'm trying to say is that What I'm trying to say is that, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted with the questions. What I'm trying to say is that your POC, right, models your journey as a cloud engineer. So whenever you're trying to test things around front end, you don't start thinking about what project will I use. You already have a sim. And when I say a POC, I don't mean go and build the next Facebook or build the next learning management system. I'm just saying a simple React app that says hello precious, or a simple React app that just contains two fields, maybe create user. Now that two fields be, and when you click on create user, it communicates with the backend. The backend gets those fields and saves it to the database. Just something very simple and plain like this, right? So you're going to have that project and you're going to use it. You're going to learn how to deploy that project, the front end into S3. You're going to learn how to deploy the front end, the back end into maybe EC2 or containerize it. You're going to learn how to deploy RDS using the database. You're going to connect these whole applications together. So it gives you like a a way of learning things without having to understand, or learning things without having to struggle with what project should I use for this? How do I understand this? Because as a cloud engineer, your fundamental and primary job is deploying applications built by software engineers. So you need to have something that models a software engineer's job, or what the artifacts they produce. You need to have something like that because it's the artifacts they produce that you deploy. So you need to have artifacts of your own to run your projects and run your POCs. So back to the question, right? Terraform is important. Knowing all these things is important, but have you started building live projects? That's my question, right? Do you have a front end? Do you have a back end? Do you have a database? Have you been able to deploy a simple front end to S3, deploy it to EC2, containerize a simple backend application, connect everything together so that when somebody comes to your application, they can communicate to the back end and the database. That is what you should be doing now. If you've learned all those tools, you need to start working you need to start building things that model those real life applications that you would be interviewing for, and companies will be asking you, how do you solve our problems? So so I'll just keep answering these questions. They are getting, they are becoming a lot. So I've answered Tony's questions, right? um yeah, yeah, true. Sorry, just, he said, I'm a machine learning engineer. I want to have a solutions architect skill set. What can I do? So, machine learning has like a very interesting relationship with cloud because most of the models you're going to be running and training right are in the cloud. So, you're going to basically interface with cloud unless you run your models. Um, you run your models on site, right? Or you run your models on a company infrastructure, which is not the cloud, right? So as a machine learning engineer, I think the first thing you need to understand is just like I've said, and I'll make a lot of reference to that thing I've said, right? You need to understand the services that are required to run your machine learning application on the cloud, because that's how you become a solutions architect. You don't A solutions architect is somebody who basically brings up different services and builds up a solution that addresses a business problem, right? So if you are a if you're a machine learning engineer, then you probably need to start learning what is required. What is required? What is the If I'm trying to build a data lake today, right? What are the necessary services that I need to build a data lake, right? What is the trade-off if I use this service, because there are a handful of services, right? If I use this service against the other service, right? What is going to be the challenge, right? What am I losing on this end, right? So you need to understand. Sorry, excuse me. You need to understand what services are required, right? And you can't understand those services that are required if you don't have a POC. So when I started, I worked with a company last year where I consulted for them and I had to build out their data lake, right, for them. And what I did before I started that project, right, I had worked with companies where I wasn't responsible for building data lake, but I maintained the data lakes, right? So what I did for myself was to download a huge data set, right? I downloaded a huge data set. I built a simple application that was streaming data. So I could run a test that would stream 1 million, 3 million events, right, into that data lake. Like I created a data lake, right? And I used that to model what I was going to be working because I asked for the job requirements and all that. I used that to model what I'll be working around, right? They required me to run some transformation functions. They required me to run a handful of other things to be able to process their data, then move it to SageMaker. Now, I didn't wait for their data because using their data would be overwhelming. I hadn't worked on a project of that scale before. What I did, by the time I had like a 1 month notice, the project was supposed to start in 1 month time. I spent the 1 month, the 4 weeks before that time, building out POCs that were modeling things I was going to be doing around that infrastructure. So that is how you become a solutions architect. Learn the process, not just training and deploying your data or maybe running. If you run it offline, learn the services that are required to be able to build these things end to end. From the front end, how do I expose it to the internet, to down to how do I use what service am I going to use to do my training and all. So I have um, what links do you recommend to get content to build projects? Now, I don't have any link in mind, but I know that um, there are a handful of links on GitHub, right, with demo projects. But let me not, I don't want to, I wouldn't recommend links, right? This is my own learning journey. I don't try to take a dump of what people have built. What people have built, most times the trainings you see or the projects you see people put out there that are free are things they've used to learn, right? So I want to start mine from scratch. I want to see the chart because if you just go and take a Terraform project that provisions an EC2 instance, provisions an RDS database, builds module out of them, creates a backup, does a handful of beautiful things, you can't learn with that, right? Now, it can be a reference material, but when you go get projects that somebody has built and you want to rebuild it, you don't learn so much. This is from my own experience, right? So what you do is to what I think you should do is to start out, model your training. Okay, I want to learn how to build a front-end application today. Get the components of the system that you need to deploy. Like I've said, the very basic component is a front end, a back end, and a application. I want to learn how to build a front-end application today. Just a very small front end. I take a course, I learn how to build it, I deploy it to S3. I want to learn how to deploy a back-end application today. I learn. So my advice is so that you can monitor your progress, so that you can learn these things and not just taking somebody's brain dump and putting in yours, right? It can serve as a reference material, but don't just dwell on this project as a way of um, sorry, I'm getting distracted. As a way of learning, and it wouldn't really help you a lot because I have a lot of people say share your project. They DM me and say share project that I can use, projects you've done in the past, right? Most of the projects I've done in the past are advanced projects. I can share them with you, but you wouldn't really understand more a lot because when I started working on this project, it was a learning phase for me, and I had to walk through it bit by bit, step by step, to learn these things and then grow in them. This is for learning and building. So there are a handful of if you go to the AWS skill builder, right? There are a handful of projects there. If you insist on looking for projects, there are still a handful of projects on GitHub. There's also Nana's course, but I think Nana's course is overpriced, right? Sorry about that, but it's overpriced for if you live in Africa, and $2,000 is a lot of money, or $5,000 to pay for a course. I don't know if that's what the case is, right? But I think she does a lot of hands-on projects, right? But there are a handful of them out there, and you can check projects on GitHub. You can check projects on Skill Builder. So it says I'm already a cloud engineer, but I'm very interested in software engineering too. If I take a lot of time to learn software engineering, would that be a waste of my time? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Then you're probably attending towards being a platform engineer because in my job currently, I write code, right? It's mostly Golang code. right? But um, I enjoy being a software engineer. Having been a software engineer in the past, I enjoy being a cloud engineer, right? Because I understand, I'm able to communicate with the software engineers in ways that we understand each other, right? It is something you can um, go after. That's I wouldn't advise you to if you don't have a job or you're just starting out, right? I wouldn't advise you to start learning how to build software because those are two different careers. But if you already have a job, you're working as a you're working as a cloud engineer, then on the side, it's going to be a great idea. It's a good investment. Let me put it that way. If you start learning how to code, write codes, and do a handful of other things, right, around backend, specifically using something like Golang, right, it's going to help your cloud engineering journey a lot because most tools, something like Kubernetes, Crossplane, most CNCF tools are built using Golang. So it's just a way of, it's going to be an excellent investment into your career. It says, what are your thoughts on AWS CDK? So for me, AWS CDK is, oh yeah. So for me, AWS CDK is one of those tools that AWS just uses, right, to build. It's just like infrastructure as code, right? And I think it's not necessarily, if you are heavily vested in AWS CDK, then it's a good idea to go that way, right? But I would not advise, I wouldn't build any project using AWS CDK. I would use Pulumi, right? I would use Pulumi to build a project instead of AWS CDK because Pulumi does not limit me to just what AWS does, right? And it's it's um, it's much more robust than AWS CDK. It doesn't just um, cater for cloud provision, right? There are a lot of integrations that you can do with Pulumi, right? Around CNCF tools. They have integrations for Jenkins. They have integrations like you can go on to write code for most of these things using Pulumi, right? So I wouldn't build any project using AWS CDK. I would rather do Pulumi instead of AWS. But if you have a specific need, if there are APIs that AWS CDK provides, I don't think there are APIs that they provide that Pulumi doesn't. I haven't really compared, right? But I would think that would be my best. That would be my go-to tool to building out cloud infrastructure using code. OpenStack. I've had debates, so many debates around OpenStack, and OpenStack caters for a very small variety of a small category of people, right? And in 2023, right, I haven't seen, I haven't still seen um, anybody who uses OpenStack um, that doesn't work in a data center, right? Or run a small data center. You need OpenStack if you're working in data center that are orchestrating their things themselves, right? Um, the jobs for OpenStacks are very limited out there, right? Because companies don't want to invest. Running OpenStack, using OpenStack is a huge investment. Companies don't have that kind of, if you're not an infrastructure company, companies don't have that kind of money to invest in something like OpenStack, right? I've used OpenStack in the past, about 2 years ago, but I worked in a data center, right? I worked with a data center. I worked on a data center project. I currently use OpenShift on the project I'm currently working on now. But these are specific um, needs for the companies that are provisioning. So they're deploying specific applications. These are not just your general front end, back end application. They are enterprise requirements. They are requirements, business requirements, right? For these applications. That's why they are trying to use OpenShift for it, right? It's not necessarily that OpenShift does something that is better than AWS or maybe it's cheaper than AWS, right? Cost is a different conversation altogether. But some of these applications they need to be able to they have hardware they want to be able to manage themselves and because they want things like data, something like data residency, GDPR consents, and all. That is why they are going with things like OpenStack, OpenShift, right? But if you're starting out as a cloud engineer or you're already a cloud engineer, I think you're better off learning how to use other cloud um, platforms like AWS than necessarily learning how to use OpenStack. Because of course you need hardware to run OpenStack properly, right? Which you might not, unless you have the hardware available, right? Which might not be readily available to you. I have 4 more minutes to go now. Um, He said, I have a to-do app using Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. That's my excellent, right? So learn how to use these applications, learn how to containerize them, learn how to probably that MongoDB, right? Maybe you can build something, you can switch, you can use maybe like an ORM, right, for that Node.js application so that you can modify that Node.js application to use an ORM, right? So that you can deploy to MySQL or PostgreSQL so that you can also test out how to deploy to RDS, how to backup, how to do disaster recovery, right? Let's say you delete your database and you've done a backup. How do you recover it, right? So with this POC app you have, you can learn most things you want to learn. You can even modify this POC app to stream data to a particular S3 bucket, build a data lake. You can do a lot of things with it, right? I said, describe the tasks in the life. I probably would come back to this question by Mitchell, right? I was answering this question. Um, yes, I think AOS Note is relatively affordable, right? I've seen his project. I know a handful of people who have done it, right? I think it's relatively affordable, and he puts in a lot of work to do those projects. So I think it's a good start, right? But most importantly, you need to learn, like I said, you need to learn how to solve business problems, right? Um, and business problems are real life applications, right? That is why you need your own POC, right? So as you join through, you're modifying these applications, you're thinking you need to have a space in your head to think like a software engineer, right? You're thinking, what if I want to add this feature? How do um, I don't think I've not seen. I think most of the projects I've seen are using WordPress to do X, Y, Z. I don't think I've seen anything aside. Correct. I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong. I don't know if that's true, right? So could you talk about the myth about how there are no junior? Yeah, I was just discussing this with someone this morning, and the person was bitterly complaining about there are no junior cloud roles. And I think it's not true, right? But I think what what people are looking for, why there are not necessarily junior cloud roles available, plenty of them available there, is that you're dealing with critical resources, right? Nobody is going to hire you to come to their application to learn, right? People need to see that you're bringing in some certain level of value into their organization, right? So most junior engineers have had the opportunity of working in the past. They just end up using the organization's infrastructure to learn, sometimes to mess it up. And organizations have learned better, right? They know better about this now. So most times they would rather not hire somebody who has, if there are no 2 or 3 senior engineers on the team, they'd rather not hire you to do anything on their infrastructure, right? So, and I think that one of the challenges we have is that most of our junior engineers or people who are starting out in cloud, they are not looking for places to learn. They are not looking for places where they can um, deploy their knowledge for a lower cost. Right? You can't be a junior engineer and you're looking to work in a company where maybe there are maybe their spend on infrastructure every month is like $10,000, $15,000, right? Now, you would rather you have a better shot at a small startup company that's going to pay you way lesser, a very small salary, right? But someone is looking for a junior engineer role. They're looking for a place where they're going to pay them maybe 1,000, let's say in Nigerian currency, maybe let's say 500K and 700K. Nobody's going to hire you and pay you 700K and you come and use their infrastructure and learn how to deploy EC2 instances, right? Or learn how to deploy business applications. And I'm being very honest, right? So most junior engineers, they extend their hands to where they hang their coats where they can't reach it, right? It's you grow into these things, right? You work with a small. And when I started out, I started doing things, and or let me even see, I started out long ago, but when I have seen people who I advise, go for these organizations that probably wouldn't pay you so much or wouldn't pay you anything at all, right? And not just because they don't pay you at all, you go there and you mess up. Show up every day and show them that you're a committed person. Besides learning a lot, right? You're going to have a better shot of getting a job there, right? If you show up every day. So you see people who are junior engineers, they are interning with the company, they probably are not paying them so much, they don't show up, they have so many excuses, and at the end of the day, they can't get a job after interning for 1 year. So I see people who are just jumping from one internship to the other. I know someone who into has jumped to 3 companies in doing internships, right? Because and when I started discussing with the person, I discovered that it was his attitude, right? He didn't have the right character, right, to be able to pin down an internship, see it from end to end, show up every day. So as a junior engineer, your character matters. It's not just about yours. You're not just trying to learn skill. You're trying to work. You're trying to switch a role. You're trying to learn. You're trying to wade into a different water, right? You need to build the character to be an excellent engineer, right? So, and if you have the skill or you're smart or you learned AWS on that one, I don't have a character, it wouldn't work for you. And most importantly, try to start small. If you apply to all the jobs on LinkedIn, all the senior engineer roles on LinkedIn, no miracle is going to happen. You're not going to get a feedback, right? So you need to start small. Look for companies where you can offer your internship skills, then go on to build capacity there, build value there, build projects there, and most importantly, understand, write your certifications. Like I said, certification is not an avenue for job, but it gets you through the HR's gates, right? So when you've built capacity here, when you've built capacity in these small companies, it gives you the capacity to look for different companies. And when you start talking to them and discussing the projects you've done, they want to hire you, even though they know that you probably are not bringing in as much value, but they know that you have built character. And when I see people, and to just end it here, right? When I see people who have written certifications and I discuss with them, and not the people who use don't, because I know people who use don't. Um, so writing certification just shows that the person has put in a lot of effort into learning, into growing, and into building capacity. That's just what I see with people who write certifications, right? So I think that when you take out an internship job, right, and you want to work in a place, right, you want to build capacity, you go and get an internship job, right? Most times when you go to other companies and you're discussing about your project, even though you might not be as good as their engineers, what they want to see is the effort you've put in, the capacity you've built before they offer you a position. How do you think AI will affect cloud engineers, especially DevOps engineers? So it's very interesting. I was debugging something this morning. I did some Kubernetes cluster upgrades this morning, and there were just some errors. I had to go to the Cube events. I had to go to the logs. I had to look up a handful of so many things before I found out what the problem is. Right? I had node constraints, volume constraints, so many things. I discovered that AI is actually going to help us. It's not going to bring. No architecture, most architectures, even if they offer the similar business, is the same. So I'm not going to say I don't think AI is going to come and replace cloud engineers, right? But it's just going to lower the pool of people and make it harder. It's going to lower the pool of people who maybe if you have 3 cloud engineers, AI can make it easy for you to run and maintain your infrastructure using one. So it's going to cut down on jobs, right? That is why you must upskill crazily with this age of AI, right? It's going to lower the pool of people who have cloud jobs, because if you're just an AWS person, or you're just an EC2 bash scripting person, right? And cloud companies are looking for way more than that. They probably will not hire you, right? But I think what it's going to also do is that it's going to make people more effective in your job. It's going to make your job a lot easier. I don't think that AI is going to completely replace cloud because AI, now let me put it this way, right? And the positive about it is that AI requires cloud, right? AI requires cloud in as much as it's going to reduce the pool of engineers, right? It's even doing it's in fact it's doing it across all industries, right? But the thing is that one thing I bet on AI with is that AI is going to keep running on cloud for the next 20 years. I don't think it's going to change. So uh, you need to build your skill. You need to learn how to deploy AI models, right? You need to learn them as part of your cloud. A lot of people need to go beyond deploying applications to learning how to deploy AI models and run them in the cloud. I think those are the things that people need to start thinking about now. The age of running applications is almost behind us because it's almost like your HTML and CSS, right? Now we are in the age of running AI applications in the cloud, right? That is what is going to be the next big thing for um, cloud engineers. So you see them transitioning to MLOps and doing a handful of things there and here. So I think that's all for the question, except Don Mitchell's questions, right? Describe the tasks in the day, in the life of a role that requires deep cloud knowledge, but it's mostly customer facing and focused on solving business problems. So if you work for a company that um, if you work for a company that sells or resells, let's say a company that resells an enterprise application, something like SAP, right? And you're trying to deploy SAP and integrate with the existing cost. I'm sorry, it's 7 minutes past our time, but after this question, I think that will be it, right? Sorry about the delay. We had some issues starting up. So now, if you work for a company that deploys SAP or resells a software that is an enterprise product, then you don't just need a basic cloud knowledge to deploy the application because each customer comes with their own need, right? We want some integration, we want you to deploy. So some people want to deploy some of their enterprise products on site. So some of them are running OpenShift, some of them are running Kanzu, that's VMware Kanzu, right? So your knowledge of Kubernetes, running Kubernetes on EKS is not going to it's going to get you to the door, but you need to do an extremely, if you're somebody who just has that knowledge, you have to be, you have to research very well to be able to do that kind of deployment, right? Now, you require deep cloud knowledge to deploy some of these applications because some of these applications you need to be able to integrate. If you're running on site, you need to be able to integrate cloud infrastructure, give them requirements. And sometimes it gets to the hardware bit where you don't, where you leverage on your knowledge of AWS to work with, right? Um, so let's say you're deploying a SAP application, right? You need to now start accounting for the number of nodes you need. Are they going to be VMs? Are they going to be bare metal? Are they going to, what's the networking, right, going to look like? What's the IP pools going to look like? Several things that are going to happen. How are you deploying it, right? So many things that you need to start putting into consideration, right? You just want to dump it on, you just want to dump it on a bare metal server, right? How do you do distributed? How do you monitor it, and how do you do high availability for it? Right? These things are like high-end cloud. You require deep cloud knowledge to be able to execute this kind of project excellently, right? And then you have to be able to talk to the customers every day, right? Trying to solve their needs and answer their questions around, how this is going to affect their existing systems, networks, and infrastructure. So I think that is it. I think I enjoyed this session, although I was almost put off by the delay in starting. But then, thank you so much for coming. I want to express a very big thank you to everybody who was patient enough for me to sort this, right? So I intend to do this like every month, discuss several and random topics every month. That is just going to help you upskill and grow and progress in your cloud journey. And I hope to see you next time. If you have any question, you can reach out to me, send me a DM. It might take some time because um, I also have work to do, right? I might not have seen it, right? But then I would reply. But then if I don't reply, you can also send me another DM. Right? Most likely this time I'll see because I get a lot of DMs every day. So I've enjoyed speaking to everyone. I hope if you're in Lagos, we get to see. And at the Unilag Security AWS Community Day West Africa, that's happening in Unilag on the 19th. I'll be there and I hope to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming and have a good evening. Bye.